Hi, I decided to make a video showing how to use layers and masks, about as simplified as I can get. A friend of mine's trying to remember how to use Photoshop or learn how to use Photoshop, and one of the things that people don't always understand is how layers work. So a layer is exactly that, a layer. Every image that you're working with in Photoshop has layers. Right now there's only one, the background layer. This is a freshly opened image. You can see the history. There's nothing there, just opened. And there's a background layer. I don't recommend doing anything to your background layer. If you need to do some editing, I mean, other than cropping and things like that, of course, but if you need to do some editing, it's better to do it on a duplicate layer. Now, there are several ways to do it. You can go up here to Layer, drop down and click Duplicate Layer, and it'll give you a duplicate of the background layer. Or you can learn your quick keys. Control-J gives you a duplicate. You can see these two images. This one and this one are exactly the same. It duplicated that layer. So this layer has all the data that this layer has, which is great if you're wanting to use something like a clone stamp tool. So let's say I wanted to use clone stamp, right? Got it all set at 100. Take all the bubblegum off the sidewalk, right? Now I like to leave the check out of the aligned sample block. That way it doesn't track. That way if I click right here, then it's just going to keep taking it from that spot. That way each time I click again, I get to select it. Now you don't necessarily always want to use that, but that's how I use it. I was trying to make sure my aligned sample box isn't checked unless I have a purpose for it. Oddly enough, it defaults to it being checked, which is annoying to me. Anyway, so you take all the gum out, right? I'm just clicking on areas that I'm like, okay, this area looks similar enough to this area that it's not going to leave a circle. Click on that, right? Taking all the gum out of the sidewalk. Woohoo! Now, what if I click over and I'm like, uh-oh, I clicked off part of this sidewalk. Well, and the cool thing is you can add a mask to this layer. Keep in mind, we are only working on this layer. In fact, if you make this layer invisible, like you take off the little eyeball so it shows what it looks like without this layer, see how the gum reappear? And so you click that layer and it shows you what you've done. So this layer basically supersedes this layer. So you can hit this to add right down here, it's add vector mask. And it'll add a mask to this, a white mask. And so over here where I took off a piece of the sidewalk, I can select my brush, and just like you do any mask, you can paint it on and off, right? Because it's just a mask. Black brush, it'll reveal what's on white, and the reverse is true. And so I'm just going to paint it right over the top of this, and what do you know? My sidewalk comes back, right? That's a great thing about using a duplicate layer to do things like that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and compress these layers, Control-Shift-E. Now they're both merged into the background layer. So this is my new singular layer, background layer. Well, what if I want to adjust the levels? Levels and curves, they can lighten, darken, or give you different types of contrast. I like a good linear contrast on curves. So if you go to curves, you can lighten, right, or darken. You can do a little bit of both. You can lighten and darken, right? See the little S curve happening up here? That gives you contrast, right? Well, the other thing you can do is, see here it says custom. You can drop it down and just hit linear contrast. That's a very light contrast. You can see just barely a difference, right? But what if you want a stronger contrast? You can hit increase contrast, right? There's different kinds of contrast. Medium contrast, strong contrast. So you can make it whatever you want it to be. Before I do curves though, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this curves layer. Doesn't want to be deleted. I'll just drag it down to the trash can. There we go. Let's talk about levels. So if your little mountain, if you look up here under adjustment and levels, if you have this just space down here where it's not coming up at all, there's no rise, then it's important you go ahead and adjust your levels. It needs more contrast. Your image is a little flat. So move it at least to where the thing starts to have a little bit of something, right? And you can see the difference. Now you might want a little more than that, just a little more contrast, right? That's what I'm doing. And then over here, even though I have some white, I'm going to go ahead and bump that up too. And that'll give you contrast. So I like to use levels before I use curves. And then if there's something else I want to do, curves seem softer to me. Levels is a harder way of doing contrast. So look how much just more dynamic that image is. Now I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to pop up a curves layer. So I just hit curves. Now what I want to do is just lighten his face just a little bit. So I'm going to bump this up right here, right? Now the whole thing's lit. The whole thing's a lot lighter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control-I, and it's going to invert that mask. So that mask doesn't, that curves layer, that light curves layer doesn't even show anymore. You can click it on and off, it doesn't show at all. So to reveal it, I just use a brush on white. Now I have my opacity set at 100 and my flow at 100, and so I'm going to set my flow down to like 5. That way it just goes on real soft and gradual, and I just want to lighten his face just a little, just his eye area a little bit. And so let's go ahead and do this. So a little bit lighter on the eyes, and then I'm making my brush a little bigger, a little lighter on the whole face. And that'll like just help him to show a little bit more. Now his arms looking a little light to me, so, or a little dark to me, so I'm going to lighten those too. But I don't want to lighten his white shirt, you know. So you can see the difference. It just makes everything look a lot cleaner. I'm going to put a little bit more on his forehead. A little bit lighter, not too much. And so then we have, you can see the difference, what happens when you click on these different layers. And any of these layers could be deleted without affecting the background layer. And you'll notice too that these are not duplicate layers. These lighten and darken, but they don't have the data that the background image does. So it's not a duplicate layer. It literally is just an adjustment layer. So those are my favorite layers for just basic editing. I feel like everybody needs to kind of know how to use those and know how to add a mask and know how to invert the mask, so you can just put things back on or take things off as you will. But I will continue making more of these little videos to help anybody who wants to learn how to start using Photoshop. Hey, if you're watching, please follow me, follow my YouTube channel.